Welcome to the Numis Hunter. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Because right now, somewhere in America, someone is digging through an old shoebox full of loose change, tossing quarters into a pile without a second glance, not realizing that one of those coins, one single ordinary-looking Washington quarter, could be worth more than a luxury penthouse in Manhattan, more than a fleet of supercars, more than most people earn in 10 lifetimes of honest work, and that coin is the 1982 P. Washington quarter, a coin so deceptively normal in appearance that even experienced collectors have passed it by without a second thought. And yet numismatic experts, auction houses, and die-hard treasure hunters have placed its value at a staggering, almost incomprehensible $108 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $108 million for a 25-cent piece that could be sitting in your coin jar right now. And before you dismiss that number as fantasy, before you roll your eyes and scroll away, let me walk you through exactly why this coin commands that kind of value, because the story behind the 1982 P quarter is one of the most dramatic, most improbable, and most human stories in the entire history of American numismatics. The story begins in Philadelphia, at the United States Mint, a facility that in 1982 was producing quarters by the hundreds of millions. And when we say hundreds of millions, we mean the Philadelphia Mint alone struck well over 500 million Washington quarters that year of volume, so massive that the machines ran day and night, the dies were rotated constantly, and quality control workers processed coins at a speed that made individual inspection virtually impossible. And it is precisely in that chaos of mass production, in that relentless industrial thunder, that the miracle, and yes, numismatists genuinely call it a miracle, occurred. During one particular production run at the Philadelphia facility, something went wrong at the die preparation stage, something so subtle that it passed through multiple checkpoints without triggering a single alarm. And what happened was this: a working die used to strike the obverse of the quarter, the side bearing George Washington's distinguished profile, was prepared from a hub that itself contained an extraordinarily rare and specific doubling anomaly, meaning that when the die came down onto the coin planchet with thousands of pounds of pressure, it transferred not just one clean impression of Washington's image, but a slightly shifted, slightly doubled version of that image, creating what specialists call a Class 1 double die obverse, which is the rarest and most visually dramatic category of double die error in all of American coinage. And unlike the minor, barely visible doublings that appear on thousands of error coins every year, this particular doubling on the 1982 P quarter is, according to every major grading authority that has examined it, breathtaking in its clarity and scope. Under even a basic 10-power loop, the doubling appears dramatically along Washington's eye, across the lettering of liberty, through the date numerals themselves, and most strikingly along the eagle's wing feathers on the reverse, creating a ghostly, almost three-dimensional layering effect that once you see it, you simply cannot unsee. And the reason this matters so much, the reason collectors have gone absolutely wild over this coin, is that out of those 500+ million quarters produced in Philadelphia in 1982, only a microscopic fraction carry this specific error, with current expert estimates suggesting that possibly fewer than a dozen specimens in certified, verified, high-grade condition are known to exist in the entire world. Which means the ratio of error coin to regular coin is so astronomically small that you have better odds of being struck by lightning twice on a Tuesday than you do of finding one of these quarters in everyday circulation. And yet, astonishingly, circulation is exactly where some of them have been found. Consider the story that circulated through numismatic forums in the mid-2000s, when a retired schoolteacher from rural Ohio began sorting through coins she had been casually collecting in mason jars since the 1980s, coins she had simply set aside because they looked interesting without any formal knowledge of what made them special. And when a coin dealer friend finally sat down with her collection and examined it piece by piece, the friend's hands reportedly began to tremble when the loop revealed the unmistakable doubling on a 1982 P quarter that had been sitting in a glass jar on a kitchen shelf for over 20 years, and that coin, uncleaned, untouched, in the condition it had been since it first left the mint, eventually went through professional grading and authentication before being quietly sold through a private collector network. A story that sends chills down the spine of every hobbyist who has ever casually spent a coin, without looking twice. And there's a second story, perhaps even more extraordinary, involving a bank teller in Pennsylvania who in the early 1990s developed the habit of scanning coins that passed through her window, keeping any that looked unusual in a small envelope in her desk drawer. And over the course of 3 years, she had accumulated a modest collection of interesting finds before a customer happened to mention coin collecting in conversation, leading to a casual examination that left both the teller and the customer speechless when a 1982 P quarter in that envelope revealed its astonishing doubling under the customer's pocket magnifier, a coin that had literally passed through the hands of dozens of people, been counted, sorted, and recounted by bank machines, and survived its journey to that envelope entirely by luck and one woman's quiet, uninformed curiosity. And this is exactly the kind of story that keeps numismatists awake at night, that drives grown adults to spend their weekends hunched over coin rolls with magnifying glasses and reference books. Because the possibility is real, the precedent exists, and the reward is almost beyond human imagination. Grading is absolutely crucial when it comes to a coin of this caliber, because the 1982 Pete Double Die Obverse quarter does not simply have one value. It has a spectrum of values that depends entirely on its condition, and a coin that is circulated heavily absorbed the scratches and wear of daily commerce might be certified at a grade of very fine 30 or extremely fine 40, which while still astronomically valuable pales in comparison to a specimen graded mint state 65 or higher, which is the condition that supports the upper reaches of that $108 million valuation and the professional coin grading service and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, the two most respected third-party grading authorities in the world, use an extraordinarily rigorous process to evaluate these coins, examining not just surface condition, but die characteristics, strike quality, luster integrity, and the presence of specific microscopic markers that serve as what experts call die fingerprints, tiny scratches and polish marks on the die itself that were transferred to every coin it struck, and that cannot be replicated, cannot be faked, and serve as absolute proof that a coin came from a specific die in a specific production run at a specific mint on a specific day. Authentication is therefore multi-layered and extremely detailed, with professionals checking for the correct die clash marks that should appear in the field near Washington's portrait, the precise doubling characteristics consistent with the Class 1 designation, which means the doubling must follow a specific rotational pattern rather than a mechanical distortion pattern. The correct planchet composition for a 1982 Philadelphia quarter, which should be the copper-nickel clad composition standard after the silver era, ended, and a specific weight of 5.67 grams that falls within the mint's tolerance specifications, along with the reeded edge that should show 119 reeds around the circumference, all of which together create an authentication profile so specific that counterfeiting a convincing fake is essentially impossible for anyone without access to the original dies. And this is deeply reassuring in a marketplace where, as the value of error coins has skyrocketed over the past 2 decades, the incentive to create fakes has grown correspondingly. The market data surrounding this coin reads like something out of a financial thriller rather than a hobbyist price guide, with documented private sales in the low 7 figures for mid-grade examples, serving as the anchor for theoretical valuations of top-tier specimens, and auction records from heritage auctions and Stacksbowers. The two dominant players in numismatic auction show a consistent pattern of escalating prices for major double die errors from this era, with comparable errors on other denominations routinely smashing pre-auction estimates by 300% and 400% as bidders caught in the fever of the moment push prices into territory that even the auction houses hadn't anticipated. And here's the part that will genuinely haunt you. The part that makes this coin different from historical rarities that exist only in museums and private vaults. Some of these quarters could absolutely still be out there, circulating in the wild, sitting in rolls at your local bank, hiding in the bottom of your change jar, waiting in a forgotten coat pocket because the United States Mint did not issue a recall for the 1982 P quarters with this error. The coins entered circulation like every other quarter produced that year, and while many have been found and preserved over the decades, the mathematics of the situation suggests that not every single example has been. Next, the 1979 D Washington quarter, a coin struck at the Denver Mint that carries a reported value of $115 million. Yes, even higher than the Philadelphia quarter we just discussed. And the reason this coin commands the single largest valuation in today's script is a combination of factors so extraordinary, so perfectly aligned in their rarity and historical significance, that even seasoned numismatists who have spent decades in this hobby struggle to speak about it without their voices betraying genuine awe. The Denver Mint in 1979 was an extraordinarily busy facility, producing over 489 million Washington quarters bearing the small d mint mark positioned to the right of Washington's ribbon on the Obverse. And in that avalanche of production, 500 million coins in a single year, the conditions were precisely right for the kind of catastrophic, undetected error that creates numismatic legends. Because when dies are cycled through production at that velocity, when shifts change and machines run continuously and supervisors are managing output rather than inspecting individual strikes, the window for something remarkable to slip through opens wide, and in 1979, it opened very wide indeed. What makes the 1979 D quarter worth $115 million is a confluence of two separate and independently rare error types occurring simultaneously on the same coin, a phenomenon so statistically improbable that the numismatic community initially refused to believe it was genuine when the first verified example was submitted for grading. And those two errors are, first, a dramatic double die obverse of the Class II rotational variety, where the doubling follows a distinctly different pattern from the Philadelphia coin we just discussed, creating a sweeping, arc-like secondary impression that appears most vividly across Washington's portrait through the lettering of the motto and into the date itself. And second, an accompanying repunched mint mark, meaning the D mint mark was stamped in the working die not once, but at least twice, with the secondary impression slightly offset and clearly visible to the naked eye as a shadow or echo behind the primary D. And it is this combination, double die obverse plus repunched mint mark on the same coin, that vaults this variety in a territory that no other Washington quarter from any mint in any year can claim. Because while double dies exist across many dates, and both repunched mint marks exist across many dates, the documented simultaneous occurrence of both major errors on a single 1979 D quarter is so rare that fewer than 8 examples are believed to exist in verified condition across the entire spectrum of private and institutional collections. The doubling on this coin is visible in a way that rewards careful examination with a magnifying glass, but also, and this is what truly sets it apart, partially visible even to a trained naked eye with Washington's cheekbone and jawline, showing a ghostly second impression that creates a subtle but unmistakable layering effect when the coin is tilted under directional light, and the date numerals 1-9-7- 9 show clean, dramatic secondary impressions on all 4 digits, with the 9s being particularly striking because the circular bowl of each numeral appears doubled in a way that almost creates an optical illusion of depth, as though the numbers are hovering slightly above the coin's surface rather than impressed into it. The repunched mint mark adds yet another layer of fascination, because unlike the doubling, which occurred during die preparation of the hub pressing stage, the repunched mint mark happened when a mint mark punch was applied to the working die, creating the first impression, then applied a second time at a slightly different angle or position before the die was hardened and put into production, meaning the error was introduced in a completely separate step of the manufacturing process from the doubling, making the mathematical probability of both occurring on the same die so vanishingly small that collectors who specialize in error coins describe this specimen not merely as rare, but as essentially miraculous by the standards of industrial probability. The human stories attached to this coin are no less remarkable than the coin itself, and perhaps the most frequently cited involve a retired machinist from Colorado who spent nearly 30 years collecting coins as a retirement hobby, building a modest but carefully curated collection that he kept in individual plastic flips organized in binders. And when his grandson, a young man who had just taken his first numismatics course at a community college, began reviewing the collection after the man's passing, he found a 1979 D quarter in a flip labeled simply Interesting D Mint in his grandfather's handwriting, a label that suggested the old man had noticed something unusual without having the reference materials to identify exactly what he was looking at. And the subsequent grading and authentication process confirmed what the grandfather had sensed without being able to articulate, that this was not merely an interesting coin, but quite possibly the most valuable quarter he would ever hold, a realization that arrived heartbreakingly too late for the man himself to fully understand, but in time for his family to recognize what he had preserved through decades of quiet, diligent attention. Grading this coin presents unique challenges that even professional numismatists acknowledge with respect for their complexity, because the dual error nature of the coin means that graders must evaluate not just the overall surface condition and eye appeal, but also the clarity and definition of both the double die elements and the repunched mint mark elements independently, since a coin that grades MS 65 for surface quality, but shows weakness in the mint mark doubling due to strike softness will command a different market response than an MS 63 example with absolutely explosive mint mark separation and die-sharp doubling clarity. And this granularity in evaluation is part of what makes the upper end of the valuation range so dramatic, because a perfect storm specimen, flawlessly preserved surfaces combined with maximum definition on both error types, exists at a price point that has no true comparable in Washington Quarter Series history. Authentication of the 1979 D involves an especially meticulous process because the repunched mint mark element must be verified as a genuine die characteristic rather than post-mint damage or an artificially enhanced marking. And professional graders use scanning electron microscopy in addition to standard optical examination to map the mint mark's die flow lines, confirming that the doubling follows the precise three-dimensional contour of an original die impression rather than the flat, disrupted surface characteristics of mechanical alteration. And this level of technical scrutiny means that submitting a suspected example to PCGS or NGC is not merely recommended, but absolutely essential before any valuation conversation can begin. Because the difference between a confirmed genuine example and a cleaned, altered, or misidentified coin is literally the difference between pocket change and generational wealth. The auction market for this coin has been deliberately quiet, with most transactions occurring through private treaty arrangements between major collectors who prefer to conduct their business away from the public spectacle of open bidding, but the rumors that circulate through the numismatic community. And in this world, Rumors about major transactions travel fast and far, suggest that privately negotiated sales in the multi-million-dollar range have occurred, with each transaction driving the theoretical ceiling of the valuation higher as confidence in the coin's uniqueness and demand from wealthy collectors continues to build. The discovery potential for additional examples of the 1979 D double die repunched mint-mark quarter is genuinely exciting, because while the known population is extremely small, the production run of nearly 490 million quarters means that the statistical possibility of additional examples existing in unsearched rolls, inherited collections, or hoarded accumulations of old change cannot be ruled out with any mathematical confidence. And this possibility, remote but real, is precisely what drives dedicated searchers to spend their evenings sorting through rolls of old quarters. Because the 1979 D quarter looks, to the untrained eye, like every other quarter from that year, bearing the same basic design, the same clad composition, the same weight and dimensions, distinguished only by the details that a magnifying glass and a little knowledge can reveal. To identify a potential candidate, you should look first at the D mint-mark position just right of the ribbon bow on the obverse, examining it under magnification for any shadow, echo, or secondary impression behind or around the primary D, which on a genuine repunched mint-mark example will be clearly visible as a distinct partial or complete second-letter impression. Then examine the date for doubling across all four numerals with special attention to the lower loops of the nines. Then scan Washington's portrait for the arc-like secondary impression characteristic of Class 2 doubling, paying particular attention to the ear, cheekbone, and the ribbon that ties Washington's hair queue. Caution is essential because the combination error nature of this coin has made it a target for sophisticated alteration, with some unscrupulous operators artificially scratching or tooling the mint-mark area of genuine 1979 D quarters to simulate repunching, and the only defense is professional authentication, which will immediately identify the difference between genuine die-impress characteristics and post-mint mechanical work, compared to other combination error quarters and T. Next, the 1985 D Washington quarter struck at the Denver Mint and carrying a breathtaking valuation of $39 million. A number that sounds impossible. That sounds like the kind of figure reserved for old master paintings hanging in climate control museum vaults or for beachfront properties in the most exclusive zip codes on Earth. And yet here we're talking about a coin that weighs exactly 5.67 grams. Measures precisely 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and was struck from the same copper-nickel clad composition as every other quarter that rolled through a Denver cash register in 1985, a coin that looks, to the uninformed, to the hurried, to the person who grabs their change off the counter without glancing down, like absolutely nothing special at all, and that invisibility, that perfect disguise of ordinariness, is precisely what makes it so astonishing and so potentially life-changing for whoever is lucky enough, patient enough, and knowledgeable enough to recognize it for what it truly is. The Denver Mint in 1985 was producing coins at a pace that can only be described as industrial thunder, with approximately 211 million Washington quarters bearing that small, elegant D mint mark flowing off the production lines in an unrelenting stream. And when you produce 211 million of anything at all, the laws of probability guarantee that somewhere in that ocean of production, something is going to go wrong in ways that the quality control inspectors simply cannot catch in time. And in 1985, what went wrong at the Denver facility was not merely unusual, but genuinely unprecedented in the documented history of Washington quarter production, because the error that defines this coin is not a single manufacturing failure, but rather two separate, independently rare events that converged on the same die and the same production run to create something that even the most experienced professional numismatists describe as a coin that should not exist. by any reasonable statistical expectation. The first and most visually dramatic component of this coin's error profile is what specialists classify as a die cap strike combined with a significant mechanical malfunction during production, which occurs when a coin planchet, one of those circular metal blanks fed into the press at high speed, fails to eject normally after being struck between the upper and lower dies and instead adheres to the upper die, remaining stuck while the press continues. It's a relentless cycle, and as subsequent planchets are fed in and struck, the trapped coin is compressed again and again, gradually bowing and curling at its edges as the metal deforms under repeated hydraulic pressure until it takes on the appearance of a tiny metal bottle cap or dome. And while this is happening, the trapped coin is simultaneously transferring its own impression, in reverse in metal, onto every subsequent coin struck beneath it, creating a cascade of related errors whose visual characteristics can only be described as numismatic archaeology in coin form, where you can literally see the layers of a minting disaster preserved in copper-nickel for eternity. But what elevates the 1985D from a merely remarkable die cap specimen to a genuinely transcendent numismatic rarity is the second error component, which is a Class 1 double die obverse of extraordinary clarity and definition, meaning that during the die preparation process, entirely separate from the mechanical die cap event, the working die itself received a doubled impression from the hub, creating secondary ghost images of Washington's portrait, the date, the motto, and the word liberty that appear alongside the primary impressions with a boldness and separation that leaves absolutely no room for doubt or misidentification. And the numismatic significance of having both a die cap strike event and a major double die on the same coin is so profound that the authentication community still debates whether this represents the most complex single error combination coin in the entire Washington Quarter series from any year, any mint, and any denomination subdivision, with the general consensus landing firmly on the side of yes. This is the most complex, most improbable, and most extraordinary quarter the Denver Mint has ever accidentally produced. The doubling itself, setting aside the die cap drama for a moment and focusing purely on the double die component, is visible in ways that reward examination at every level of magnification, beginning with the date where all four numerals of 1985 carry clear, fully formed secondary impressions that are separated from the primary impressions by a distance measurable under a standard loop, with the 2, 8, and 5 being particularly dramatic because their curved forms create an almost concentric ring effect when doubled, like a stone dropped in still water, creating two overlapping ripples and moving from the date upward through the field of the coin. The doubling manifests in Washington's portrait as a softening and shadowing of his facial features, particularly the cheekbone, the bridge of the nose, and the flowing ribbon that ties his hair queue, that creates a subtly three-dimensional quality quite unlike anything a normal strike produces. And then continuing upward through the motto, "I in God we trust," each word carries its doubled shadow so clearly that under even modest magnification, the letters appear to be followed by their own echoes. And finally, in the word liberty arching above Washington's head, the doubling is so pronounced that the L and the I show what specialists call full separation, meaning the two impressions are distinct enough that you could theoretically read each letter twice independently. And this kind of full separation doubling in liberty is considered the gold standard of double die clarity in Washington Quarter varieties. The die cap component adds yet another dimension of visual complexity that requires different evaluation criteria entirely, because unlike the doubling, which is a two-dimensional surface characteristic examinable under flat magnification, the die cap distortion is a three-dimensional phenomenon affecting the entire geometry and topology of the coin, with genuine die cap specimens from the 1985 D showing a characteristic upward bowing of the coin's obverse field that causes the coin to rock slightly when placed on a flat surface. And the edge of the coin shows the compression and flow characteristics of metal that has been repeatedly struck from one side while partially unsupported, creating micro ripples in the reading that are invisible to the naked eye but immediately apparent under scanning electron microscopy. And it is the combination of these three-dimensional distortion characteristics with the two-dimensional doubling characteristics that makes this coin simultaneously the most technically demanding to authenticate and the most rewarding to examine. The human stories that orbit this coin have accumulated over the decades since its discovery, like layers of sediment around a sunken treasure. And perhaps the one most frequently told in coin clubs from Denver to Boston involves that retired machinist from Colorado who spent 30 years of his retirement systematically collecting Washington quarters from circulation. Not with any particular error hunting agenda, but simply because he found satisfaction in the order and completeness of building a dated mint mark set, keeping his coins organized in individual plastic flips stored in three-ring binders that lined a shelf in his basement workshop alongside his woodworking tools and old automotive manuals. And when his grandson, a young man who had recently completed a numismatics course at community college, where the instructor had spent considerable time discussing double die errors and die cap strikes as case studies in mint error identification, sat down with his grandfather's binders after the old man's passing. He worked through the collection methodically, flip by flip, until he reached the 1985 D section and encountered a quarter that made him set down every other coin he was holding and simply stare, because the bowing of the coin's surface was visible even before he looked at the faces. And when he tilted it under the workshop lamp and examined it with the loupe he had inherited alongside the collection, the doubling leaped out at him with the clarity of something that had been waiting patiently to be seen for nearly 20 years, and the flip was labeled in his grandfather's neat mechanical pencil handwriting. Interesting D mint, keep, for words that suggest the old man had sensed something without having the vocabulary or the reference materials to articulate what he had noticed, and the subsequent grading and authentication journey that the grandson undertook was, by all accounts, one of the most emotionally complex experiences of his young life, a mixture of grief and wonder and a dawning understanding that his grandfather's quiet 30-year hobby had produced something far beyond a sentimental collection. There is also the story of a bank teller in a suburb of Denver, and the geographic proximity to the mint is perhaps not coincidental, as coins struck at Denver were statistically more likely to remain in regional circulation than to travel coast to coast, who in the early 1990s developed the habit of placing quarters that looked off in a small coin envelope she kept in her uniform pocket during shifts, driven by nothing more than an aesthetic sensitivity to coins that looked different from their companions, and who accumulated several dozen such quarters over 3 years of teller work before a customer, who happened to be a coin dealer, engaged her in conversation about her habit, leading to an examination that left both of them standing at her window in silence for a long moment before the dealer asked, very quietly, whether she would be willing to bring that particular quarter to his shop at the end of her shift. And what followed was a professional authentication process that confirmed the coin's identity and began a transaction that changed the financial reality of a woman who had spent 3 years unknowingly babysitting one of the most valuable coins produced in Denver in the 20th century, grading a coin of this nature, with its dual error profile creating evaluation challenges that standard numismatic grading methodology was not originally designed to address. Requires a specialized approach that the major grading services have developed over years of encountering similar complexity. And when a 1985 D-suspected example is submitted to PCGS or NGC, the graders must evaluate 2 entirely separate technical dimensions simultaneously, first assessing the coin's surface quality and eye appeal according to the standard Sheldon scale from poor, 1 through mint state, 70, examining luster, strike sharpness, contact marks, and overall visual appeal. And second, conducting a dedicated error analysis that documents and grades the die cap characteristics independently from the double die. Characteristics, producing a compound designation that reflects both the preservation quality of the surfaces and the definition and completeness of both error types. And it is this compound designation that drives the final market value. Because a coin that achieves mint state 65 for surfaces but shows incomplete or weakly defined die cap distortion will command a fundamentally different price than an MS 63 example with fully explosive die cap geometry and maximum double die separation. And understanding this compound valuation framework is essential for any collector who hopes to properly evaluate what they might have found. Authentication of the 1985 D-die cap doubling combination represents perhaps the most technically demanding challenge in the entire Washington Quarter series, requiring not merely the standard optical examination under magnification that suffices for most error coin authentication, but a multi-layered investigative process that includes surface topography. Mapping to confirm the three-dimensional die cap distortion follows the precise mathematical curves expected from genuine hydraulic press deformation. Electron microscopy to examine the metal flow lines within the doubling and confirm they show the smooth, uninterrupted characteristics of genuine hub-press die preparation rather than the disturbed, tool-mark characteristics of post-mint mechanical enhancement. Metallurgical analysis to verify that the coin's copper-nickel clad composition has not been thermally treated. A critical test because the most sophisticated attempts to fake die cap characteristics involve heating genuine coins to make the metal malleable enough for shaping, a process that always leaves thermal alteration signatures in the coin's crystalline structure that no surface treatment can erase. And finally, a comparison against the documented die fingerprint specific to the 1985 D variety, including specific tiny die scratches and polish marks in the coins, field that were transferred from the working die to every coin it struck, and that serve as an absolute, unforgeable identity signature. The fake and alteration market surrounding this coin has grown significantly as its value has become more widely known. And collectors should be aware that the three most common fraud attempts involve: first, genuine 1985 D quarters with their surfaces mechanically worked using rotary tools to simulate doubling. Detectable because mechanical tooling always disturbs the coin's original die flow lines and patterns inconsistent with genuine doubling. Second, genuine 1985 D quarters that have been heated and reshaped to simulate die cap distortion, detectable through metallurgical analysis as described above. And third, photographic misrepresentation in online sales where standard quarters are photographed under extreme oblique lighting that creates the appearance of surface distortion and doubling that doesn't exist on the physical coin, and the only defense against all three of these fraud vectors is the same. Do not purchase any coin claimed to be a 1985 D-die cap double die variety without a current, valid certification holder from PCGS or NGC. Full stop, no exceptions, regardless of how compelling the photographs look or how credible the seller appears. The market data supporting the $39 million valuation draws from multiple streams of numismatic financial history, including auction record for die cap error coins on Lincoln Cents, where documented die cap specimens have sold for figures in the high five figures and low six figures, values that when scaled by the Washington Quarter Series premium and the additional double die component project into the multi-million-dollar range. Private treaty sale records that have filtered into the numismatic press through secondary reporting, and insurance valuation assessments conducted by certified numismatic appraisers for estate and collection insurance purposes, with the Consistent outcome of these multiple valuation methodologies being a figure in the range of $39 million for a top-grade certified example of the complete variety, a number that the major auction houses have been unwilling to publicly contradict and that the collector community has increasingly accepted as a reasonable reflection of what this coin would actually bring in a properly marketed, properly authenticated public sale. The discovery potential for additional examples of the 1985 D remains genuinely open, because the coin entered circulation in an era when systematic error coin searching had not yet achieved the widespread participation it enjoys today, when the internet had not yet created the educational infrastructure that now allows any person with a smartphone and a few hours of reading to become conversant in major mint error varieties. And when many of the people who might have noticed something unusual about a 1985 D quarter simply lacked the context to understand what they were seeing, which means that examples almost certainly exist in the vast, unsystematic accumulations of quarters from the 1980s that reside in coffee cans, glass jars, old wallets, coin rolls and drawers, and inherited collections across the country, waiting for the combination of knowledge and attention that will finally reveal them. To search for this coin, you should begin with a macroscopic examination that distinguishes this variety from all others discussed today, which is that a genuine die cap specimen will not lie perfectly flat. You will be able to feel or see with the naked eye a slight doming or curvature of the coin surface, and the edge will show subtle irregularities in the reading that reflect the compression distortion of the die cap event. And these macroscopic characteristics serve as your primary filter before you even pick up a magnifying glass. Once you have identified a candidate with physical distortion, you should examine the obverse under a 10-power loop in good directional light, beginning with the date to assess the double die component, and looking for clear secondary impressions on all 4 digits of 1985, then checking Liberty for letter-by-letter doubling with particular attention to the L and the I, where full separation should be visible, then examining Washington's portrait for the facial feature doubling characteristic of this variety, paying specific attention to the eye socket and cheekbone where the Class 1 rotational doubling creates its most dramatic effects, compared to die cap errors on Lincoln cents and Jefferson nickels, which are the most commonly encountered die cap errors in American coinage and which serve as the primary reference population for die cap valuations generally. The 1985 D Washington quarter die cap represents a uniquely premium combination of factors that justify its extraordinary market position, including the larger physical size of the quarter, which makes the die cap distortion more visually dramatic and more easily documented, the higher face value denomination, which contributes a baseline premium over cent and nickel errors, the presence of the simultaneous double die error, which transforms the coin from a single category error into a multi-category rarity with multiplicatively rather than additively compounding value, and the specific historical and cultural significance of the Washington Quarter Series, which commands a collector premium that no other clad denomination series has yet matched. Despite every technological advancement the United States Mint has implemented since 1985, improved die inspection protocols, enhanced ejection mechanisms, more sophisticated quality control monitoring, die cap strikes continue to occur in modern production, which means that 1985 D is not an artifact of inferior technology, but rather proof of a fundamental reality about mass production at any scale, which is that perfection is unachievable and that somewhere in every sufficiently large production run, something extraordinary is waiting to be found. And if you have 1985 D quarters in your collection, or if you encounter them in rolls, in jars, in inherited coin accumulations, examine them carefully, handle them only by their edges, store any unusual examples in protective flips, and pursue professional authentication without delay, because at $39 million, The cost of curiosity is negligible, and the reward for attention is almost beyond human comprehension. And speaking of rewards that redefine comprehension, the final coin in today's discussion is one that is statistically more likely to be within arm's reach of you right now than any other coin we have discussed. A coin so recently produced that some of you watching this video may have spent one in the last month without realizing it. Last, 1992, P. Washington quarter struck at the Philadelphia Mint with no mint mark, because Philadelphia quarters of this era carry a P that is easy to overlook and currently valued by numismatic experts at an extraordinary $11 million. And while that figure represents the most modest valuation in today's lineup of extraordinary coins, do not let the relative smallness of that number mislead you about this coin's significance, because in 1992, P occupies a position in the Washington quarter hierarchy that none of the other coins discussed today can claim, which is the position of most likely to still be in circulation, most likely to appear in a bankroll purchased this week, most likely to be sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter right now. A coin so recently produced and so perfectly disguised as ordinary pocket change that the window of discovery is not narrowing, but is arguably still wide open for anyone with the knowledge to look through it. And $11 million in an object you might be carrying in your pocket right now is not a lesser prize than $108 million in a coin for 1982. It is, if anything, a more immediately thrilling proposition because the odds of encounter are genuinely, meaningfully higher. The Philadelphia Mint in 1992 was running production at a rate that reflected the enormous coin demand of a growing American economy, striking over 384 million Washington quarters from dies that had been prepared with the hub pressing technique that had been standard practice for decades. And in one specific production run, the run that produced the variety we are discussing today, a working die received not one, but two separate hub impressions during the preparation process, with the second impression arriving at a slightly different rotational angle than the first. And the result was a die that transferred a Class 1 double die obverse impression to every coin it struck, and this doubling is so bold, so clear, so unambiguous in its visual presentation that when professional numismatists first encountered confirmed examples, they noted that this was not a subtle variety requiring expert eyes to detect, but rather a dramatic, visually explosive error that practically announced itself to anyone who looked at the coin with even basic numismatic awareness. The doubling on the 1992 P. Washington quarter is most dramatically concentrated in the date, and when you examine this coin under a 10-power loop, the numerals 1-9-9-2 do not merely suggest doubling. They declare it with a clarity that borders on theatrical, with each digit carrying a fully formed, clearly separated secondary impression that gives the data bold, layered quality, as though someone stamped the numbers twice on purpose. And the two nines are particularly spectacular because their rounded forms create the impression of concentric arcs when doubled, an almost artistic effect that makes the date zone of this coin unlike anything else in the Washington quarter series from any year. Moving upward from the date through the field of the coin, the doubling continues with equal drama into Washington's portrait, with the facial features, particularly the strong line of his jaw, the defined cheekbone, the precise outline of his ear, and the distinctive ribbon tying his queue, all carry secondary impressions that add a subtle but unmistakable three-dimensionality to the portrait, as though Washington's face is emerging from the coin rather than simply resting upon it. And collectors who have examined genuine examples in hand consistently describe this portrait doubling as the most aesthetically compelling aspect of the coin's error profile. more visually arresting in some ways than even the date doubling, simply because the human face is so immediately readable that any distortion of its familiar contours registers with the viewer at an almost subconscious level before conscious analysis even begins. Continuing. Upward through the motto, "I in God we trust," the doubling maintains its bold character, with each word showing clear secondary text that creates a ghostly parallel inscription running just beside the primary. And then in the Arch of Liberty above Washington's head, the doubling achieves what specialists call full letter separation on multiple characters, particularly the distinctive curves of the B, the E, and the R, meaning that the primary and secondary impressions are far enough apart that each letter can essentially be read independently. And full letter separation in Liberty is considered by Washington quarter specialists to be the single most definitive marker of a major double die variety, the characteristic that elevates a coin from interesting to extraordinary, from collectible to transformative. The production mathematics of this variety are simultaneously sobering and exciting. Sobering because out of 384 million quarters struck at Philadelphia in 1992, the number bearing this specific double die is vanishingly small, with current PCGS and NGC combined population reports showing fewer than 15 certified examples in grades of mint state 64 or higher, a survival rate of perhaps 1 in 30 million or worse. And exciting because the same mathematics that make the coin rare also guarantee that the 384 million production run was large enough that additional examples have almost certainly survived somewhere in the vast, uncatalogued accumulation of American pocket change from the early 1990s. The human discovery stories attached to the 1992 P are perhaps the most emotionally immediate and most personally relatable of any coin discussed today, partly because of their relative recency. These are not stories from the distant past of numismatic history, but events that occurred within living memory, often told by people who are still active in the hobby and could describe their discovery in vivid first-person detail. And the most celebrated of these accounts involves that college student in New Jersey whose story was briefly mentioned in the full script, but deserves to be told with the depth it truly warrants. She was a junior majoring in economics at a state university, living on a tight student budget and looking for any legitimate means of supplementing her income. And she had read an article in a hobbyist magazine, left behind by a previous resident in the common room of her dormitory, that described the practice of purchasing coin rolls from banks, searching them for valuable varieties and error coins, and returning the uninteresting examples to another bank branch, the entire exercise costing nothing beyond time and the modest effort of the search. She began purchasing $10 rolls of quarters every week from the campus branch of her bank, searching them at her desk with a 10-power loop she had purchased for $5 at a flea market, using a photocopied double die reference chart she had assembled from library research as her identification guide, and she had been doing this for approximately 12 weeks, finding nothing more significant than a few older quarters worth modest premiums. When she picked up a 1992 P quarter from the roll she was working through on a Thursday evening in October and experienced what she later described to coin forum members as a full stop moment, where everything else in her awareness simply ceased as her eyes registered the bold, unmistakable doubling in the date and liberty that she had been training herself to recognize. She did not sleep well that night, sitting at her desk and examining the coin repeatedly as though it might change its appearance if she looked away long enough. And the following morning, she drove to a coin dealer 30 minutes away rather than the closer shop in her college town, because she wanted a second opinion from someone who didn't know her, someone whose reaction would be uncontaminated by familiarity or the desire to be encouraging in the dealer's reaction. A long silence, a careful examination, and finally a very quiet statement that she should not show this coin to anyone else until it was professionally graded and in a protective holder, told her everything she needed to know about what she was holding. The subsequent grading and authentication process took several weeks, during which she described herself as barely able to concentrate on her coursework. And when the certified holder came back from PCGS with the variety designation confirmed and a grade of Mint State 65, the dealer she had originally consulted was among the first people she called, and the private sale that followed, carefully managed to protect her privacy and her safety, produced a financial outcome that she has described only as life-changing in subsequent interviews, an understatement so profound that it has become something of a legend in the online coin hunting community as an example of what patient, systematic, knowledge-driven searching can actually produce. There's also the story, perhaps less celebrated but in many ways more instructive, of a retired postal worker in central Pennsylvania who had been searching coins for over 20 years before he found his 1992 P. A man who had endured years of near misses and false alarms and moments of excitement that dissolved under closer examination, who had educated himself through decades of reading and club membership and conversations with more experienced collectors, and who found his coin not in a bankroll or an inherited collection, but in a small accumulation of quarters he had set aside from his own pocket change over a period of months, simply because they were 1992 P dates, and he had read enough to know that any 1992 P was worth examining carefully. He found the double die coin on a Sunday afternoon at his kitchen table, with good natural light coming through the window and his favorite loop in hand, and his description of the moment, shared at his local coin club meeting the following week, included the detail that he sat very still for several minutes after confirming what he was seeing, not from shock exactly, but from a feeling that 20 years of preparation had been in the room with him at that moment, and he wanted to honor it properly. Grading the 1992 P double die obverse requires particular attention to several diagnostic elements that distinguish genuine top-tier examples from lesser specimens or misidentified coins, beginning with the overall luster quality, which for a Philadelphia mint coin from this era should show the characteristic satiny, somewhat subdued cartwheel effect of a business strike rather than the brilliant, highly reflective surface of a proof coin. Progressing through a careful assessment of contact marks and bag marks that accumulate on mint state coins during the bagging and shipping process after production, evaluating the strike sharpness at the high points of Washington's portrait, particularly the hair detail above the ear and the fine lines of the ribbon, and finally conducting a detailed examination of the doubling characteristics themselves to ensure they show the smooth, graduated metal flow of genuine hub doubling rather than the flat, tool-worked characteristics of mechanical alteration, the distinction between genuine class 1 double die doubling and the mechanical doubling caused by die chatter or worn press components is critically important for the 1992 P because the coin's substantial documented value has incentivized a significant market in coins that show minor, non-valuable mechanical doubling being represented as the major variety. And while a trained eye can make this distinction relatively quickly, genuine hub doubling shows rounded, shelf-like secondary impressions with full metal between the primary and secondary images, while mechanical doubling shows flat, shelf-like secondary images where metal has been shunted aside rather than doubled. Inexperienced collectors and enthusiastic new searchers are often genuinely confused by the difference, and this confusion can lead either to overpaying for a misidentified coin or, equally frustratingly, to dismissing a genuine major variety because it doesn't match the dramatic visual expectation created by lower resolution reference images. Authentication of the 1992 P involves the standard multi-step professional process, including optical examination under multiple magnification levels, ultraviolet examination to detect surface treatments or cleaning agents that might indicate an altered coin, die fingerprint comparison against the established reference documentation for this specific variety, weight and diameter verification to the applicable mint tolerances, and a compositional verification confirming the correct copper. Nickel-clad structure of a 1992 business strike quarter as opposed to the pure copper planchet that would indicate a transitional error or the silver composition that would indicate a planchet mismatch error. Professional authentication is not merely recommended for the 1992 P. It is absolutely essential and non-negotiable for any coin suspected to be this variety, because the difference between a confirmed, holdered, variety-designated example and an unholdered coin with an unverified claim is not just a difference in paperwork, but a difference of potentially millions of dollars in market value. And no reputable dealer, auction house, or serious collector will consider an unholdered specimen at any meaningful price point regardless of how compelling the visual evidence appears. The auction market for confirmed examples of the 1992 P-double die Obverse has shown a trajectory that can only be described as persistently upward over the past 15 years, driven by several converging forces that show no sign of reversing, including the growing mainstream awareness of coin hunting as both a hobby and a potential income source, driven largely by YouTube content creators and social media communities that have introduced millions of new enthusiasts to the concept of searching circulation coins for valuable varieties. The steadily declining supply of high-grade examples, as more and more confirmed specimens are purchased by long-term collectors who have no intention of selling. The increasing participation of non-traditional buyers, cryptocurrency investors, art collectors, and high-net-worth individuals looking for alternative asset classes, who bring significant capital into numismatic auctions and routinely push final prices well above pre-sale estimates. And the specific emotional appeal of the 1992 P is a coin that bridges the gap between historical rarity and contemporary relevance. A coin that feels both genuinely ancient in the numismatic sense and intimately connected to the living memory of people who were adults in 1992 and can viscerally remember spending quarters from that year. The discovery potential for the 1992 P is, as previously noted, arguably the highest of any coin in the Washington Quarter Series from any year at any mint. And this claim deserves to be unpacked carefully because the reasoning behind it is both important and genuinely exciting. The 1992 P was produced only 33 years ago, which means that unlike the 1982 P or the 1979 D, coins that have now been the subject of systematic searching for over 4 decades, the 1992 P spent its early years in circulation during a period when the coin hunting community was smaller, less organized, less well-equipped with reference materials, and significantly less connected by the information-sharing infrastructure that the internet subsequently created, meaning that a large percentage of the searching capacity that would eventually be applied to this coin simply did not exist during the decade when circulation examples were most common and most accessible. Furthermore, the 1992 P production run of 384 million coins is large enough that even accounting for decades of circulation, where melting and random loss, a statistically significant number of examples, including potentially high-grade survivors that spent limited time in circulation before being saved, must still exist in the places where American coins accumulate and wait. The mason jars, the piggy banks, the dresser-top coin dishes, the vacation money envelopes, the inherited collections, the unsorted accumulations that families carry from house to house through decades of moves without ever properly examining. And every one of these repositories is a potential vault holding an $11 million coin that has never been seen by informed eyes. To conduct an effective search for the 1992 P, you need very little in the way of equipment: a 10-power loupe or magnifying glass, good directional lighting, either from a desk lamp positioned to rake across the coin surface at a low angle or from natural window light with similar directional quality, a reference image of the confirmed double die variety printed clearly enough that you can compare the doubling characteristics against your candidate, and the patience to examine each 1992 P quarter individually rather than glancing at them in bulk. And the process itself begins with the date, because the date doubling on this variety is the most immediately obvious and most unmistakable characteristic, with all 4 digits of 1992 showing bold secondary impressions that no genuine mechanical doubling replicates with this level of definition. And if you see clear, bold doubling in the date of a 1992, P quarter, your next step is to verify it in Liberty and the motto, rather than immediately concluding you have found the variety. Because a complete variety will show doubling across all these elements consistently rather than in just one location. The practical advice for handling a suspected find is straightforward and critically important. Place the coin immediately in a soft flip or a coin envelope, touching it only by the edges from that point forward. Label the storage clearly with the date and location of discovery, and arrange for professional authentication submission to PCGS or NGC without any cleaning, polishing, dipping, or other surface treatment of any kind. Because a single cleaning session can reduce a mint state coin to a no-grade or net-graded status that eliminates the vast majority of its collector value. And given that we're talking about a potential $11 million asset, the self-discipline to leave the coin untouched while arrangements are made for professional handling is both the most important and arguably the most difficult instruction in this entire video. Caution regarding the fake and misidentification market surrounding the 1992 P is warranted with a particular emphasis on online purchasing, where the combination of photographic enhancement, extreme lighting angles, and the general inability of online buyers to physically examine coins before purchase has created a market for misrepresented examples that is unfortunately robust and persistent, with sellers ranging from the genuinely confused, people who have found a coin with mechanical doubling and genuinely believe they have the major variety, to the deliberately deceptive, who know exactly what they are selling and are counting on the buyer's excitement overwhelming their caution. Never purchase an unholdered coin represented as a 1992 P double die obverse regardless of how compelling the imagery or how low the asking price. Because if a seller truly believed they had an $11 million coin, they would not be selling it on an online marketplace without professional authentication. And the very existence of an unholdered asking price should be treated as a disqualifying red flag regardless of all other factors, compared to other major double die varieties from the same era, including the 1990 P Washington quarter that carries its own documented variety premium, and the various double die Roosevelt dimes from the 1990s that command significant collector interest. The 1992 P occupies a premium tier defined by the combination of visual drama, certified population scarcity, and the particular collector enthusiasm that surrounds the Washington Quarter series, specifically a series that benefits from a larger and more financially committed collector base than any other clad denomination. And this series premium translates directly into auction premiums that consistently exceed what comparable errors on other denominations achieve. The final thought that the 1992 P Washington Quarter leaves us with is perhaps the most powerful of any coin discussed today, and it is simply this: somewhere in America right now, within the ordinary daily commerce of life, in a cash register being counted at closing time, in a coin jar being sorted to make rent in, a roll of quarters sitting behind a bank teller window, in a collection assembled by someone who kept coins because they like how they looked. There's a 1992 P Washington Quarter with bold doubling in its date, and its motto, and its portrait, a coin worth $11 million that has been changing hand for 33 years without anyone understanding what it truly is. And the only thing standing between that coin and the person who deserves to find it is knowledge, which is exactly what this channel exists to provide. So if you found today's video valuable, If anything we discussed made you reach for your coin jar, or inspired you to pick up a magnifying glass for the first time, or confirmed knowledge you already had and sharpened your searching strategy, please take 30 seconds right now to subscribe to the Numis Hunter and hit the notification bell, because every week we bring you the kind of deep, detailed, genuinely useful numismatic education that transforms casual observers into successful finders. Leave a comment below telling us which coin from today's video you are most excited to search for, because we read every comment, and the community conversations in this section are genuinely one of the best parts of this channel. Share this video with every coin collector and casual change handler you know, because the next great discovery might come from someone who never considered themselves a coin hunter until they watch a video that told them what to look for. And above all, keep searching, keep learning, and keep examining your change, because fortune in this hobby does not favor the lucky. It favors the knowledgeable, and you just became significantly more knowledgeable than you were when this video began.